Hey everyone! Ready to dive deep into the world of The Help? Released on August 10, 2011, this film has sparked endless discussions, and today, we're uncovering every thrilling detail. If you enjoy this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us grow. And for more incredible movie explorations and hidden gems, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's unravel the magic behind this cinematic masterpiece. On the 10th of August, 2011, a film quietly stepped into theaters and left with the world in its grasp. The Help, a cinematic gem that didn't just entertain but peeled back the layers of America's deeply rooted social wounds. Directed by Tate Taylor and based on Catherine Stockett's best-selling novel, the movie offered more than just drama. It provided a deeply personal window into the unspoken truths of the American South during the 1960s. In a time when history's painful echoes still resonate loudly today, The Help captured something rare. The ability to show the extraordinary within the everyday, to elevate voices long silenced, and to make us feel the heartbreak, humor, and humanity of those forced to live in the margins. It's this unique blend of poignancy, strength, and authenticity that turned a modest book adaptation into a cultural lightning rod, one that continues to inspire discussion, admiration, and reflection over a decade later. The brilliance of The Help lies not in grand special effects or explosive action sequences but in the delicate unraveling of real human stories. What makes this film extraordinary is its ability to translate heavy, uncomfortable truths into something deeply watchable, intimate, and even beautiful. It dares to look into the soul of a society that smiled while oppressing, that polished its silver while stepping over broken spirits. Through stunning performances, meticulous production design, and a powerful emotional undercurrent, the film elevates its story to something that feels timeless. At its core, it's about women, strong, flawed, complex women, and the invisible war waged between dignity and degradation. The visuals, drenched in sunlit southern charm, conceal the storm of injustice brewing beneath every calm conversation, every polite dinner party, every whispered exchange behind closed doors. At the heart of this unforgettable story is Eugenia Skeeter Phelan, played with earnest energy by Emma Stone. Skeeter is fresh out of college, full of ambition, and returning to her hometown of Jackson, Mississippi, where women her age are more concerned with marriage than manuscripts. But Skeeter isn't like the rest. She notices things, uncomfortable things, like how the women she grew up with now treat their maids with cold detachment. Like how the woman who raised her, Constantine, is no longer working in her family's home without much explanation. And most importantly, she begins to realize that the polite racism she's been conditioned to ignore is not just wrong, it's inhumane. What starts as a simple curiosity grows into something far bolder. Skeeter wants to write a book, one that tells the truth about what it's like to be a black maid working for white families in the South. But doing so will mean asking the very women she sees every day to risk everything. Enter Aibileen Clark, portrayed by Viola Davis with such soul-shattering grace that it's impossible to forget her. Aibileen is a quiet woman whose strength lives in her restraint. She has raised 17 white children throughout her life, pouring love into each of them while watching her own dreams fade in the background. After losing her son to a senseless tragedy, Aibileen continues to serve a family that barely sees her. But Skeeter's proposition ignites something in her, a recognition that her pain, her truth, her story might finally matter. Davis doesn't just play Aibileen. She becomes her, embodying decades of sorrow, wisdom, and resilience in every movement, every look, every word spoken in that soft, deliberate tone that echoes long after the scene ends. And then there's Minnie Jackson. Bold, brash, and unfiltered, she storms through the film with unmatched intensity. Octavia Spencer brings Minnie to life with a performance that's as hilarious as it is heartbreaking. Minnie is the kind of woman who says what everyone else is thinking, but she pays the price for her honesty. Fired for standing up to the domineering Hilly Holbrook, she becomes both the comic relief and the emotional firebrand of the story. Her friendship with Celia Foote, a misunderstood outcast played by Jessica Chastain, adds layers of complexity to a narrative already overflowing with nuance. Celia is desperate for friendship and utterly unaware of the racial codes of conduct that govern Jackson society. Their unlikely bond, awkward, funny, and eventually heartfelt, becomes a subtle critique of the very systems that divide people. Hilly Holbrook, of course, represents the cruel face of that system. Played with icy perfection by Bryce Dallas Howard, Hilly is charming on the outside and terrifying beneath. Her push for the Home Help Sanitation Initiative is just one way she disguises her prejudice as propriety. She weaponizes respectability, using social status to control everyone around her, especially the help. Her character is so compelling precisely because she believes she's doing the right thing. She is not a monster in her own eyes, and that is what makes her terrifying. In a world where evil often hides behind smiles and pearls, Hilly is the wolf in pastel wool. As Skeeter collects the stories of the maids, each tale more harrowing and honest than the last, the stakes grow higher. The book, once just an idea, becomes a rebellion. The fear is palpable. These women could lose everything, their jobs, their homes, even their lives. But slowly, courage spreads. One voice leads to another, and soon the maids begin to share their truths. Some stories are small, humiliations, insults, quiet injustices. Others are raw wounds, full of pain, violence, and shame. But together, they paint a picture no one can ignore. The publication of their book, anonymously credited and nervously awaited, sets off a firestorm in Jackson. Secrets come to light. Reputations crumble. And most importantly, a movement begins, not with riots or headlines, but with whispered truths finally spoken aloud. The visual storytelling in The Help is subtle but rich. Every scene is carefully crafted to reflect the era's contradictions, the beauty of Southern life cloaking the ugliness beneath. The homes are spotless, the lawns manicured, the clothing impeccable. But in the kitchens, the laundry rooms, and the back alleys, we see the cost of that perfection. Cinematographer Stephen Goldblatt uses warm lighting and thoughtful framing to emphasize the distance between the worlds of the employers and the help. There's always a door between them, a threshold, a line that must not be crossed, until, slowly, the characters begin crossing it anyway. Whether it's in the secret meetings between Skeeter and the maids or the quiet defiance in Abilene's final stare-down with Hilly, these small moments ripple outward with enormous emotional power. The soundtrack, scored by Thomas Newman, is like a soft heartbeat underneath the film's emotional tension. It doesn't overwhelm but lingers, haunting, nostalgic, and stirring. Gospel influences, soulful melodies, and gentle piano work complement the setting while reminding us that this isn't just a story of pain, it's one of resilience. The music acts like a narrator in its own right, giving voice to what the characters often can't say. When The Help hit theaters, it didn't just draw applause, it ignited conversation. Critics praised its performances, particularly those of Davis and Spencer, who both received Academy Award nominations, with Spencer taking home the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. But beyond the awards, the film struck a chord with audiences. It spoke to history, but it also echoed into the present. People weren't just watching, they were reflecting. Debates flared about the film's framing, about whether its storytelling was too filtered through a white savior lens. These criticisms weren't unfounded, and they added layers of complexity to how The Help was received. But perhaps that's why it became a cultural phenomenon. It didn't just tell a story, it opened a conversation. What the film does best is remind us that change doesn't always come in sweeping revolutions. Sometimes, it starts with a conversation, a whisper, a book, a decision to tell the truth, even when it's dangerous. Abilene's final walk away from the job that defined her life is more than just an ending. It's a quiet explosion, a defiant choice to step into the unknown with her head held high. It's that moment, subtle and wordless, that sticks with you. Because it shows that dignity, once claimed, can never be taken back. And that's why The Help is worth exploring again and again. Because it speaks to something universal, the need to be seen, to be heard, and to be valued. It shows us how oppression survives in silence, and how courage begins when someone decides not to stay silent any longer. It's a story of mothers and daughters, of loss and laughter, of friendship and fear. It's about a time and place, yes, but more importantly, it's about the people who lived through it, who made choices both cowardly and brave, and who remind us that progress is possible, one voice at a time. So if you haven't seen The Help, or even if you have, now is the perfect time to dive back in. Watch it not just for the stellar performances, the beautiful cinematography, or the powerful score, but for the stories within the story, the ones that were never meant to be told, yet found their way to the light. And as you watch, ask yourself, whose voices are still waiting to be heard? Whose stories are still hidden? Because sometimes, the greatest act of rebellion is simply telling the truth. The story of The Help begins with a quiet kind of defiance, one that doesn't shout, but simmers, building slowly in the heat of Jackson, Mississippi. It's the early 1960s, a time when the air is thick with humidity and unspoken rules. The opening voice belongs to Aibileen Clark, a black maid who has spent her life raising white children while grieving for her own. Her voice is steady, worn by time, yet filled with a quiet dignity that immediately commands attention. She's caring for Mae Mobley Leafault, a curious toddler who craves love, yet lives in a household where emotional connection is a luxury, not a necessity. Aibileen loves this child deeply, even as she prepares for the inevitable moment when that love will be disregarded, forgotten, or worse, punished. Aibileen's life is a routine wrapped in silence, but it's clear from the beginning that this silence weighs heavily on her. Her best friend, Minnie Jackson, is the perfect foil, loud, proud, and hilariously blunt. Minnie is the kind of woman who doesn't walk into a room quietly. She barrels in with attitude, armed with a sharp tongue and sharper opinions. She's working for Hilly Holbrook, the queen bee of Jackson's white social circle. Hilly doesn't just command attention, she demands obedience. Her push for the Home Help Sanitation Initiative, which would force all white families to build separate bathrooms for their black maids, isn't just a cruel policy, it's a symbol of control, of dehumanization masquerading as public health. Enter Eugenia Skeeter Phelan, returning home from college with more than a degree. She carries questions, doubts, and an unsettling awareness that the world she left behind no longer feels like home. Her friends, including Hilly and Elizabeth Leafault, are wrapped tightly in pearls, gossip, and tradition. Their lives revolve around charity benefits and bridge club meetings, all while pretending the help are invisible. Skeeter, played with a restless energy by Emma Stone, is different. She wants to be a writer, not a wife. And though she doesn't quite know what she's looking for, she's already begun to sense the quiet hypocrisies unraveling around her. The first spark is personal. Skeeter discovers that Constantine, the black maid who raised her, is no longer with her family. The answers she gets are vague and unsatisfying, laced with discomfort and avoidance. Something about Constantine's departure doesn't sit right. It's a mystery wrapped in shame, and it sets Skeeter on a path toward truth. She takes a job at the local newspaper, answering cleaning advice letters, a task she's hilariously unqualified for. In a stroke of practical genius, she turns to Aibileen for help, asking her to provide cleaning tips under the radar. But beneath the surface of this innocent collaboration, something bigger begins to take shape. It starts as a question. What is it like to be a maid in Jackson? Skeeter wants to tell the stories that have never been told, the ones hidden behind closed doors, buried under decades of obedience. But Aibileen knows the risks. Speaking out could mean losing everything. In the South of the 1960s, truth is dangerous. Yet something about Skeeter's determination, naive but sincere, begins to crack open the door. Aibileen agrees to speak, but only in whispers, only in secret. Their first meetings are tense, full of fear and uncertainty. But each conversation becomes a stepping stone, a breath of defiance. Meanwhile, Minnie finds herself in the middle of her own battle. Fired by Hilly for using the inside bathroom during a storm, she's blacklisted from every decent household in town. Desperate, she knocks on the door of Celia Foote, a misunderstood woman living on the outskirts of Jackson society. Celia, played with fragile optimism by Jessica Chastain, is everything Hilly is not. Kind, clumsy, and unaware of the rigid rules that govern race and class. She hires Minnie out of desperation, unaware that doing so is itself a small act of rebellion. Their relationship begins awkwardly, with Celia hiding Minnie's presence from her husband, but there's a flicker of mutual need between them. Celia is isolated, shunned by women like Hilly and Minnie, despite her tough exterior, begins to see something real in her employer's warmth. Back in Jackson, Skeeter's mission grows bolder. She secures interest from a New York publisher who wants something raw, honest, and dangerous. But honesty comes at a price, and no one else is willing to pay it. Yet, fear spreads like wildfire among the maids. Everyone has a story, but telling it could lead to job loss, eviction, or worse. And then, a tragedy jolts them into action. Yule May, another maid and a friend of Aibileen and Minnie, is arrested for stealing a ring. Her crime? Desperation. She wanted to send her twin boys to college and took what she couldn't afford to ask for. Her arrest is a stark reminder of how unforgiving the world can be for black women in Jackson. But it's also a turning point. The maids begin to see that silence offers no safety. One by one, they agree to speak. As the book takes shape, the stories pour out, raw, painful, unfiltered. They reveal everything: the indignities, the casual cruelties, the unbearable heartbreaks. One maid recounts how she was fired for wearing her employer's old coat. Another shares how she was accused of theft with no proof. Through it all, Aibileen and Minnie remain the story's emotional anchors. Aibeleen's grief for her son, who died after being ignored in a segregated hospital, becomes the soul of the book. Minnie's story, one that involves a certain pie and an unforgettable act of revenge, brings both shock and laughter, but also a potent form of resistance. Even as these secret meetings continue, danger looms ever closer. Hilly grows suspicious of Skeeter's behavior and begins prying into her life. Her claws dig deeper when she learns Skeeter is dating Stuart Whitworth, a senator's son. Stuart represents everything Skeeter is supposed to want: status, stability, the future her mother dreams of. But the relationship is built on lies and unspoken truths. When Skeeter finally reveals her involvement in the book, Stuart recoils. He's not ready for a woman who challenges everything, who dares to question the world they live in. As the stories come together, the women grow stronger, not just in numbers, but in spirit. The risk is real, but so is the reward. For the first time, their lives are being validated, their voices recorded. The book becomes more than pages bound together. It becomes a testament, a cry for justice disguised as fiction. And in every line, there's a quiet urgency, a rising drumbeat of change. But the closer they get to finishing, the higher the stakes become. Hilly's suspicion turns into fury. She digs through Skeeter's things, searches for proof, and uses her influence to tighten her grip on the community. She threatens, she manipulates, and she punishes. When she discovers that one of the stories might be about her, one involving a pie and a very dark secret, her desperation boils over. The tension crackles. We know something is going to explode. The question is when, and how. And still, through it all, there are moments of laughter, tender scenes of friendship, subtle shifts in power. Celia, in her own quiet rebellion, begins to stand up for herself. Skeeter, though shaken, continues to write. Aibileen, with each sentence she shares, regains a piece of herself long buried. Minnie, fierce and funny, learns what real respect feels like. This first half of The Help sets the table for something extraordinary. It builds a world where every smile hides a secret, where every small kindness is an act of courage. The film lures us in with charm and southern elegance, but underneath, it pulses with urgency. These women are not just telling their stories, they're reclaiming their identities. And as the shadows begin to lengthen, we can feel it coming, the reckoning. The moment when the truth, once whispered, will roar. As the manuscript nears completion, a new tension begins to ripple through Jackson. One that no one dares name aloud, but everyone feels in the sudden hush of whispered conversations and sideways glances. Skeeter, Aibileen, and Minnie are no longer just participants in a dangerous project. They are now the beating heart of a movement cloaked in secrecy, driven by truth, and fueled by the hope that the world might actually listen. But just as hope rises, so does fear. The closer they get to publishing, the clearer the risks become. These women aren't simply telling stories. They're setting fire to a structure built on silence, and the whole town is holding its breath, waiting to see what burns first. Minnie, ever the bold one, becomes both a shield and a spark. Her infamous terrible awful story, that unforgettable revenge served in the form of a chocolate pie with a very special ingredient, becomes the masterstroke of protection. It's buried within the manuscript, unnamed but unmistakably aimed at Hilly Holbrook. The genius of it lies in its anonymity. Only the real Hilly would recognize herself, and acknowledging it publicly would expose her humiliation. It's a brilliant move that not only forces Hilly into silence, but also gives the other maids the courage they need to come forward. If Hilly can't retaliate without confirming the worst story in the book is about her, the others are suddenly safer than they've ever been. Skeeter's world begins to shift beneath her feet. Her mother, Charlotte, battling cancer and clinging tightly to Southern decorum, begins to sense that her daughter's rebellion is more than a phase. And yet, even she, in her stern and proper way, starts to reveal cracks in her resolve. When confronted about Constantine's mysterious disappearance, Charlotte finally admits the painful truth. Constantine had brought her light-skinned daughter Rachel to a gathering at the Phelan home, unaware of how scandalous such an act would appear to Jackson's white elite. Faced with the judgmental glares of her peers and desperate to maintain social standing, Charlotte forced Constantine to choose her daughter or her job. The shame of that moment still haunts her. It shattered Skeeter's childhood illusion of love and justice, replacing it with the cold, bitter taste of betrayal. Constantine didn't abandon Skeeter. She was driven away. Willingness to speak out. Her journey from silence to voice isn't dramatic. It's revolutionary in its stillness. Viola Davis doesn't need grand speeches or explosive scenes. Every glance, every tremble in her voice speaks volumes. She plays Aibileen like a symphony of restraint and sorrow, a woman holding back the tides until they can no longer be contained. Then there's Minnie Jackson, a firecracker of wit and fury, brought to life by Octavia Spencer in a role that earned her an Oscar. Minnie is everything Aibileen is not. Loud, unfiltered, bold to the point of danger. She uses humor like a weapon and sarcasm as armor, shielding herself from a world that has offered her little mercy. But beneath her bluster is a woman scarred by fear and domestic violence, stuck in a marriage where cruelty has become routine. Her transformation isn't just about finding her voice, it's about reclaiming her worth. And it's through her unlikely friendship with Celia Foote that we see this change. In the beginning, Minnie sees Celia as foolish and helpless, another clueless white woman who doesn't understand the rules of Jackson society. But Celia doesn't treat Minnie like help. She treats her like family. And in return, Minnie softens. She learns to trust again. Octavia Spencer delivers this transformation with a delicate balance of steel and vulnerability, making Minnie both fiercely funny and deeply human. Skeeter Phelan, portrayed by Emma Stone, is the bridge between these two worlds, a white woman raised in privilege, yet quietly questioning the rules of the society she was born into. Skeeter's evolution is less about awakening and more about shedding layers. She starts as a restless young writer, desperate to escape the suffocating expectations of Southern womanhood. But as she begins to listen to Aibileen and Minnie, she stops seeing herself as the center of the story. Her transformation is one of humility. Emma Stone plays Skeeter with a blend of awkwardness and sincerity that makes her both endearing and believable. She doesn't come into the story to save anyone. In fact, she is saved by the stories, by the courage of the women who trust her, and by the painful realization of her own family's complicity in injustice. Her arc isn't about becoming a hero, it's about becoming an ally. The dynamic between these three women is the emotional axis around which the entire story spins. Their trust is earned slowly, their bond formed not through sweeping moments of triumph, but through shared pain and quiet understanding. Each woman gives something up, security, comfort, illusion, in order to gain something greater, truth. But no character looms larger as a symbol of the system they're fighting than Hilly Holbrook. Played with icy perfection by Bryce Dallas Howard, Hilly isn't a villain in the traditional sense. She's something even more chilling. She believes she's righteous. She genuinely sees herself as a protector of order and tradition, unable to recognize the cruelty embedded in her every act. Whether it's campaigning for the Home Help Sanitation Initiative or sabotaging Celia Foote's place in society, Hilly represents the smiling face of systemic oppression, polite, poised, and utterly ruthless. Bryce Dallas Howard doesn't play her as a cartoonish bigot, but as a woman so embedded in her own superiority that she can't fathom being wrong. It's this certainty that makes her terrifying. She doesn't hate black people out of rage, she simply doesn't see them as equal. And that, the film argues, is more dangerous than hatred. Celia Foote, portrayed with touching vulnerability by Jessica Chastain, is perhaps the film's most surprising character. At first glance, she seems like comic relief, a Marilyn Monroe-esque misfit in a world of prim pearls and casseroles. But beneath the bleach-blonde hair and clumsy charm is a woman who's been cast out for reasons she can't quite understand. She's not from the right family, she married the wrong man, Hillis' ex-boyfriend, and worse, she doesn't know her place. But what makes Celia extraordinary is that she doesn't care about those rules. She hires Minnie not to feel superior, but because she truly needs help, and she gives as much as she takes. Their bond becomes one of the most tender in the film. In Celia, Minnie finds safety. In Minnie, Celia finds strength. Jessica Chastain infuses her performance with a fragility that never veers into parody. Every teardrop and awkward laugh feels real. And then there's Charlotte Phelan, Skeeter's mother, played by the legendary Allison Janney. Charlotte is a woman torn between two eras, caught in the twilight of fading traditions. Her character is a study in contradiction. She's fiercely proud of her daughter, yet terrified of what that pride might cost her socially. Her treatment of Constantine, Skeeter's beloved childhood maid, is a moment of deep moral failure, one that haunts both her and her daughter. But even Charlotte, steeped in Southern pride and societal expectations, shows the capacity for change. Her support of Skeeter at the end, subtle but unmistakable, is a quiet admission that the old ways are crumbling. Janney plays her with elegance, capturing both the strength and cowardice that so often coexist in people struggling to keep their world intact. Among the constellation of supporting characters, one cannot forget the silent strength of Yul May, played by Onjanu Ellis. Her brief but pivotal role as a maid arrested for stealing a ring to pay for her son's education is a gut punch. Her story, told in a single heartbreaking letter, reminds us that the stakes of speaking out are real and brutal. And yet, even behind bars, Yul May doesn't ask for pity. She asks for justice. Her courage becomes a rallying point for the others, her voice echoing through the pages of the book long after she disappears from the screen. Each of these characters, no matter how large or small their role, contributes a piece to the puzzle. They are mothers, daughters, maids, writers, and socialites. Some are brave, some are cowardly, and most are a mix of both. What The Help does so masterfully is show that change doesn't come from grand gestures alone. It comes from ordinary people making impossible choices in quiet rooms. And it's the performances that breathe life into this world. Viola Davis delivers a masterclass in restraint, her pain etched into every line. Octavia Spencer explodes with personality while never losing sight of Minnie's trauma. Emma Stone balances Skeeter's privilege with real empathy. Bryce Dallas Howard dares to be deeply unlikable, and does it so well you can't look away. Jessica Chastain brings warmth and humor to a character who could have easily been a caricature. Allison Janney plays the tightrope of generational guilt with devastating precision. But perhaps the most powerful element of these performances is how they interact. No one outshines the rest. They complement, challenge, and ultimately change each other. They form a mosaic of humanity in all its contradictions, flawed, beautiful, broken, and healing. By the time the final frames of The Help fade to black, what lingers isn't just the memory of powerful performances or sweeping dialogue. It's the feeling that you've spent time with real people. People who made mistakes, who suffered, who laughed and cried and dared to speak when silence was safer. It's a reminder that behind every movement are voices that refuse to stay quiet. And behind every voice is a person, fighting to be seen. And that's what makes The Help unforgettable. Not just the story it tells, but the people who tell it. There's something magical about watching The Help with fresh eyes, only to discover that it was layered with meaning from the very beginning. Like a well-written novel, the film reveals more the deeper you go, rewarding those who watch not just with emotion, but with perception. Its surface might be charming and heartbreaking, but beneath lies a world built on subtleties, hidden symbols, delicate foreshadowing, and cultural callbacks that enrich every scene. Take the very first moments of the film, where Abelin's voice carries us into her world. Her narration doesn't just serve as exposition, it's a coded window into her soul. She speaks about raising white children, loving them deeply, only to watch them grow up to be just like their mothers. It's more than just a sad cycle, it's a warning, a setup for the very conflict Skeeter will later wrestle with. Abelin's sorrow is not simply personal. It foreshadows the generational prejudice that permeates Jackson. Her memories are quiet landmines, placed carefully, and waiting to explode in the story's second half. One of the most telling scenes comes early on, when Skeeter returns to her family's cotton plantation. The plantation house, with its grandeur and peeling tradition, is not just a backdrop, it's a symbol. The echoes of slavery still haunt its halls, hidden behind whitewashed walls and magnolia blossoms. When Skeeter walks into Constantine's old room, it's more than nostalgia, it's guilt. The absence of Constantine, so deeply felt yet never fully explained until later, casts a long shadow that lingers in the air like dust. The script doesn't spell it out, but the implication is undeniable. The very structure Skeeter grew up in was built on erasure, and now she's finally beginning to see the outline. Another striking example of foreshadowing is the introduction of Hillis' Home Help Sanitation Initiative. At first, the idea seems laughable in its absurdity, installing separate outdoor toilets for black maids to keep diseases at bay. But it's not just a display of Hillis racism. It's a harbinger of how control and fear can disguise themselves as civility. Hillis' initiative isn't about sanitation, it's about domination. And that's exactly what the film does so well. It hides venom behind pearls and manicured smiles. The joke becomes a symbol, and by the time Minnie delivers her unforgettable, terrible, awful thing, it's poetic justice that it's centered around the same toilet-centric obsession that Hilly weaponized. The act itself, as crude as it is hilarious, becomes layered with significance. It's not just revenge, it's reclamation. Then there's the way fashion is used as a narrative tool. Skeeter's clothing evolves from the pastel conformity of Southern debutante culture to more muted, intellectual tones. Her wardrobe subtly shifts as her character does, signaling a break from the mold of women like Hilly and Elizabeth. Celia Foote, on the other hand, remains stuck in hyper-feminine, form-fitting dresses that clash with the conservative attire of Jackson's elite housewives. Her clothing becomes a visual cue of her outsider status, not just in class, but in ideology. She's a woman who doesn't play by the rules, not because she's rebelling, but because no one ever taught her what they were. Even the way food is portrayed carries symbolic weight. Minnie's cooking is not just sustenance, it's identity, love, defiance, and healing. Every dish she prepares carries more meaning than it first appears. From the chocolate pie with its now iconic twist to the fried chicken she makes for Celia, food becomes a form of communication, a language of care and protest. It's no accident that the most cathartic moments in the film occur in the kitchen, or around the dinner table. Food, in this story, is both a gift and a weapon, depending on who's holding the recipe. Sharp-eyed viewers might also notice the recurring motif of mirrors and reflections. Whenever a character confronts a moment of truth, whether it's Skeeter questioning her mother, or Abeline staring at her own pain, we see them reflected. It's as though the film quietly asks each woman to look at herself and decide who she really is. Even the children, like May Mobley, are shown mirroring the behaviors of their mothers. The heartbreaking scene where Abeline tries to instill worth in May, "You is kind, you is smart, you is important," is filmed with soft lighting and close framing, drawing a quiet line between how we see ourselves and how we are shaped by those around us. The mirror, in this case, becomes both literal and metaphorical, a tool for change. Constantine's story, though told mostly in memory, carries hidden echoes throughout the film. Her presence is everywhere, in the way Skeeter writes, in the way Charlotte looks away whenever her name is mentioned. When we finally learn the truth, that Charlotte forced her to leave after an uncomfortable encounter with her light-skinned daughter, it recontextualizes every previous scene. It's not just about Skeeter missing her beloved caretaker. It's about a woman realizing that even her own family has been complicit in cruelty. The subtlety of this reveal, delivered through hushed tones and facial expressions rather than flashbacks or dramatic monologues, makes it all the more powerful. It's a whisper that roars. The visual storytelling doesn't stop at character interactions. The cinematography itself hides emotional cues in plain sight. The town of Jackson is filmed with a golden hue, evoking a sense of nostalgia and warmth that contrasts painfully with the coldness of the social system. When scenes shift indoors, particularly in Hillis' pristine home, the color temperature cools subtly, making everything feel sterile and suffocating. The warmth returns in Celia's cluttered kitchen or Abilene's modest home, where truth is allowed to breathe. Even the lighting becomes a compass, guiding viewers to authenticity. Throughout the film, there's an unspoken undercurrent about writing and storytelling itself. Skeeter's typewriter is almost a character on its own. Its clicking becomes the heartbeat of the resistance, echoing through the night as stories take shape. When Abilene and Minnie begin to share their truths, the typewriter becomes more than a machine. It becomes a monument to testimony. It's no coincidence that the final scene finds Abilene walking away from the camera after penning her own story. It's a visual metaphor. She is no longer a footnote in someone else's narrative. She is her own author now. Even the newspapers that appear throughout the film carry hidden messages. When Skeeter first pitches her book idea, the headlines in the background reflect the real-world tension bubbling in the early 60s. Mentions of Medgar Evers, civil rights marches, and political unrest serve as a quiet reminder that this story, though personal, is part of something much larger. And when Yul May is arrested, it's not just a plot point. It mirrors the true systemic oppression that real women faced, whose voices were often lost in courtrooms and jails rather than history books. And what about the children? They are, perhaps, the most tragic and symbolic Easter eggs of all. Little May Mobley represents the next generation, still unformed and watching closely. Her interactions with Abilene show that racism isn't born, it's taught. Abilene's efforts to shape her self-worth, to tell her she matters, are like planting seeds in a garden she may never see bloom. But the hope is there, quiet and steadfast. In her final moments with May, when she says goodbye with trembling lips, we understand what's truly at stake. Not just dignity for those living in the present, but a better world for those who come next. There's also an almost invisible thread that connects the maids beyond their words. The way they hold their hands, how they react when touched, how they brace themselves when speaking the truth. These subtle cues tell the story of a lifetime spent anticipating judgment, pain, dismissal. But when they sit around Skeeter's table, sharing stories with cups of coffee and reluctant laughter, something shifts. They lean in. They smile. They begin to take up space. And it's in those quiet details, the relaxed shoulders, the softened eyes, that the true revolution begins. Ultimately, The Help doesn't need flashing neon signs to make its point. Its Easter eggs are in the softness of a gaze, the tension in a jaw, the tremble of a voice. Its cultural callbacks are rooted in the textures of its time. Jim Crow laws, colored entrances, segregated bus seats, woven seamlessly into the fabric of the story. It's a film that dares you to look deeper, to pay attention not just to what's said, but what's left unsaid. And in doing so, it becomes more than a story about race, class, or gender. It becomes a meditation on truth. The kind that hides in corners, waits in silences, and only reveals itself when someone brave enough decides to look. Long before The Help moved audiences with its stirring performances and unforgettable lines, its journey from page to screen was already brimming with strange twists, creative gambles, and behind-the-scenes surprises. Adapted from Catherine Stockett's best-selling novel, the film had the daunting task of turning a deeply personal, highly sensitive narrative about race and memory into a story that felt both universal and specific. And as it turns out, the journey was anything but ordinary. What's most curious is how close to home the entire story really was. The novel was written by Stockett, a white woman from Jackson, Mississippi, the very town where the story unfolds. But here's the twist. She started writing it just days after the 9th of November, at a time when the world was consumed with global fear and uncertainty. In a strange way, that backdrop influenced her to reflect on her own roots and the kind of love, injustice, and silence she had witnessed growing up in the South. Her childhood maid, Demetri, became the silent muse behind Abilene's character. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Demetri never gave consent to be fictionalized, and her surviving family wasn't consulted. This ethical dilemma would later resurface in the real-life controversy surrounding the film's portrayal of black voices told through a white author's lens. Still, the project moved forward with sincere intent, and when Tate Taylor, Stockett's lifelong friend, stepped in to direct, the story took on a strangely serendipitous life of its own. Taylor himself was born and raised in Jackson and lived just a few doors down from Stockett as a child. That intimacy with the setting added a layer of authenticity that most Hollywood productions only dream of. The film wasn't built on studio backlots or dressed-up sound stages. It was shot in actual homes in Mississippi, many of which had their own stories steeped in Southern history. And when production began, the locals didn't just act as extras or lend their homes. They lived through the retelling of a world that, for many, was not that long ago. One of the most unusual aspects of filming came with the casting choices. Viola Davis, who would go on to receive an Oscar nomination for her role as Aibileen, almost didn't take the part. She was deeply concerned about how black women's stories were being framed. Davis admitted she loved the script and the people involved, but worried that Aibileen didn't have enough of a personal voice beyond Skeeter's narrative. She ultimately accepted the role with the hope of honoring the women who had been voiceless for too long. But years later, she expressed regrets, not because of her performance, but because she felt the film didn't fully center the maids' inner lives. This tension between performance and perspective would continue to be a source of discussion long after the film's release. Emma Stone, cast as Skeeter, was another interesting choice. Known at the time for her comedic roles, especially in Easy A, she dove headfirst into the more serious, restrained tone of The Help. But she wasn't the original choice. The role had been offered to several other actresses before Stone ultimately auditioned. Once cast, she threw herself into understanding the Southern dialect, even though she wasn't a native speaker. Her transformation into Skeeter is subtle but striking, especially given that her natural voice is so distinctively modern. What helped her settle into the role wasn't just accent coaching. It was spending time in Jackson, reading personal accounts from women who had lived through the 1960s in Mississippi. Then there's Octavia Spencer, whose journey to the role of Minnie is a behind-the-scenes fairy tale in itself. Spencer wasn't just an actress in the film. She was also the real-life inspiration for the character. Tate Taylor had based Minnie's fiery personality on Spencer, whom he had known for years. When casting began, there were studio concerns about whether Spencer was a big enough name to carry the role. But Taylor was adamant. There was no Minnie without Octavia. Eventually, she got the part, and what followed was a powerhouse performance that won her the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. The moment became even more touching because Spencer had once worked as a casting assistant, placing headshots of other actors on casting boards, never knowing one day her own photo would be up for an Oscar. And speaking of Oscars, there's an odd behind-the-scenes superstition that followed the production. On set, multiple cast members would not say the word Oscar out loud. It became a quiet rule among the crew, somewhat of a lucky charm. Every time someone wanted to mention potential award recognition, they'd use vague code words or nicknames. Octavia was reportedly referred to as the Golden Girl in jest, especially after her emotional dailies left crew members in tears. It was their way of manifesting what they all believed. This performance would be unforgettable. Filming in Mississippi came with its own challenges. Temperatures soared to over 100 degrees during outdoor shoots, and many of the period costumes, particularly the wigs and layers worn by the women, became unbearable. Jessica Chastain, who played Celia Foote, had to wear padding to make her appear more voluptuous, along with a heavy blonde wig. The makeup and costume team had to constantly cool her off with fans between takes. But it was that discomfort that helped Chastain tap into Celia's vulnerability. Celia, always out of place and sweating through her perfectly coiffed exterior, mirrored Chastain's real-life experience of trying to maintain poise in extreme conditions. The film's infamous chocolate pie scene carries with it one of the strangest trivia stories of all. The pie, of course, is central to Minnie's act of rebellion. But here's the kicker. The pie used in the scene was real. Multiple pies, in fact. The props team had to perfect a recipe that looked authentic on camera and was safe for consumption, but also could be manipulated for the, let's say, less appetizing portions of the scene. Octavia Spencer had to film the scenes several times, keeping a straight face while describing its secret ingredient with the deadpan humor only she could pull off. The pies themselves became so iconic that replicas were later auctioned off for charity, forever enshrining dessert as a symbol of poetic justice. There were also quieter, stranger moments that occurred when filming scenes inside real homes. Some of the locations had such heavy historical energy that cast members spoke of feeling unsettled. Cold chills, sudden silence, even a few tails of lights flickering unexpectedly. The production team didn't officially comment on any hauntings, but more than one cast member admitted to feeling the emotional weight of the past seeping through the walls. And not everything strange happened on set. After the film's release, The Help sparked a wave of controversy that no one fully anticipated. While many praised it as a heartfelt tribute to unsung heroes, others criticized it for reinforcing the white savior narrative. Critics pointed out that, despite its good intentions, the story ultimately prioritized Skeeter's journey over the deeper, more painful truths of the Black Maids. Viola Davis, with characteristic honesty, later said in interviews that while she loved the people involved, she felt the story was created in the filter and the cesspool of systemic racism. It's a rare thing to hear such a raw post-mortem from one of a film's stars, and it only underscores how complex and layered this production really was. Yet despite the controversy, or perhaps because of it, the film opened up conversations that had long been silenced. It wasn't just about what was shown on screen. It was about who got to tell the story, whose truth was amplified, and how history should be remembered. And that kind of reflection, that strange tension between celebration and critique, became part of the film's legacy. Even the soundtrack carried hidden stories. The original score, composed by Thomas Newman, was carefully designed to evoke a kind of bittersweet nostalgia. But it was Mary J. Blige's original song, The Living Proof, that captured the emotional heartbeat of the film. Blige wrote the song after watching an early screening and being moved to tears. Her lyrics speak directly to the journey of survival and strength, adding a modern voice to a story rooted in the past. Perhaps the strangest and most beautiful behind-the-scenes truth is this. The Help was born from a real place, built by people who loved it, and shaped by actors who carried its weight long after the cameras stopped rolling. It remains a film caught between time periods, between hope and history, between progress and pain. And like the best stories, it continues to provoke, inspire, and challenge us, reminding us that what happens behind the scenes is often just as powerful as what ends up on screen. Some films demand to be remembered not simply because of what they show, but because of how they make people feel. The Help is one of those rare stories where the power doesn't just lie in its sweeping narrative or charming characters. It's in the quiet glances, the trembling hands, the unspoken truths echoing behind every line of dialogue. From the very first frame, the emotional resonance of this film isn't announced, but rather gently unfolded. And as we step back to look at its most pivotal moments, what becomes clear is how each one shapes the emotional trajectory of the story in ways both subtle and seismic. The opening narration, where Aibileen Clark speaks of raising 17 white babies in her lifetime, immediately grounds the viewer in the heart of what's to come. There's something disarmingly calm in her tone, yet her words carry a heavy truth. It's the kind of opening that doesn't shout but pierces. It places us in a world where love, labor, and loss all come wrapped in the same routine, and sets the stage for a film that's just as much about what's endured as what's said. This moment doesn't beg for applause, but it quietly commands respect. In just a few lines, Viola Davis anchors the entire film with a strength so gentle it's devastating. Then comes the first encounter between Skeeter and Aibileen, two women from different worlds who are about to reshape each other's lives. It's in these early conversations that we start to see the film's emotional tension sharpen. Skeeter, clumsy in her idealism, is trying to bridge a gap she doesn't fully understand. Aibileen, cautious but curious, listens with a silent dignity that tells us everything we need to know about her years of survival. It's not a grand scene, but it's one that captures the layered performances that define this film. Watching the two women sit across from each other, guarded yet open, is like watching the first flicker of a flame that could either warm or burn everything in its path. One of the film's most heartbreaking and haunting sequences is the scene where Aibileen tells little May Mobley, "You is kind. You is smart. You is important." It's a moment that resonated with audiences across the world, not because it was flashy, but because it was painfully real. The way Davis delivers the line, almost like a prayer, like she's trying to write something good on the soul of a child before the world scribbles over it, holds a quiet tragedy. Mae Mobley's innocence is set against the ugliness of the adult world she's growing into, and Aibeline's love becomes an act of rebellion, a final gift before she must let go. It's a moment layered with meaning, a reminder of the power of words, of the deep emotional toll of caretaking, and the resilience of a woman determined to do right, even in silence. Contrast that with one of the most iconic and darkly hilarious scenes in the film, Minnie's chocolate pie revenge. What makes this moment so unforgettable isn't just the sheer audacity of what Minnie does. It's the gleam of satisfaction in Octavia Spencer's eyes as she delivers the line, "Eat my s********." It's shocking, yes, but it's also deeply cathartic. For a character like Hilly, who has spent the film cloaking cruelty under the guise of social respectability, this act of rebellion is a delicious metaphor for all the indignities Minnie has had to swallow. The scene's brilliance lies in its tonal balance. It's a moment of justice dressed as comedy, wrapped in symbolism, delivered with perfect timing. Audiences didn't just laugh, they cheered. And that reaction speaks volumes about the film's ability to channel rage into release. Yet perhaps the film's most emotionally raw moment comes near the end, when Aibeline is fired from her job after Hillis' manipulations. The confrontation between Aibeline and Elizabeth Leafault, Mae Mobley's mother, is gut-wrenching not just because of what's lost, but because of what's revealed. As Aibeline walks away, tears in her eyes, Mae Mobley clings to her, crying for the only person who ever truly saw her. The pain in that moment, the mutual heartbreak between child and caretaker, is almost too much to bear. There's no dramatic music, no soaring speech. Just silence, broken by the sobs of a child who already knows what loss feels like. For many viewers, that was the moment the film stopped being a story and became a mirror, reflecting back all the complicated, painful truths of love, loss, and powerlessness. These key scenes, scattered like emotional landmines throughout the film, are each connected by a through line of thematic depth. At its core, The Help is about voice, who gets to speak, who gets heard, and who gets silenced. And nowhere is that clearer than in the scenes where the maids begin to share their stories. One by one, Aibeline, Minnie, and eventually others step into the risky unknown of truth-telling. The sequence where they gather in a church basement to speak their truths is electric. There's fear, of course, but also a collective awakening. Each woman's testimony becomes a thread in a tapestry of resistance. It's not just Skeeter writing a book, it's the women reclaiming their narratives. For the audience, it's a revelation. What began as one woman's attempt to make a difference becomes a chorus of voices rising from the margins. This transformation reaches its quiet climax with the book's publication and the ripple effects it sends through Jackson. The reactions range from furious to redemptive. Hillis' fury, Elizabeth's shame, Celia's kindness. They're all responses to the same catalyst, the truth. And within these responses lies the emotional complexity that gives the film its staying power. The Help doesn't offer easy answers or clean victories. Instead, it presents a mosaic of reactions, some heartbreaking, some hopeful, that mirror the real world. Critically, some of these moments were dissected for their portrayal of race and power. While many celebrated the film's ability to shine a light on untold stories, others felt it softened the blow of racism for palatability. The emotional depth of scenes like the firing or the final walkaway were praised, while the comedic undertones in revenge sequences drew mixed reactions. Yet even within this criticism lies a strange kind of power, the power of a film to spark real, difficult conversations. And that, in itself, is an impact worth examining. The dynamic between Minnie and Celia Foote also deserves deeper attention. Their unlikely friendship begins in the shadows, Minnie hiding from her abusive husband, Celia hiding from society's judgment. But their scenes together offer something rare, intimacy and healing across a divide. When Minnie sees Celia break down after a miscarriage, there's no grand declaration, just a subtle shift. She puts aside her role as the help and becomes a comforter, a witness to another woman's pain. In return, Celia offers something few others do, respect. Their bond isn't about race or status. It's about being broken in different ways and finding strength together. The bathtub scene, where Minnie comforts a sobbing Celia, is as quiet as it is powerful. For many viewers, it was the film's emotional undercurrent made visible. The shared humanity that defies society's cruel hierarchies. Throughout the film, director Tate Taylor employs visual storytelling that enhances these moments without overshadowing them. The use of warm, golden lighting in scenes between Aibileen and May Mobley contrasts with the cold, sterile light of the Leafold household. It's subtle, but it tells a story of warmth found in unexpected places, of love amid duty. Likewise, the decision to shoot many conversations in tight, intimate close-ups helps pull viewers into the emotional core of the characters. When Aibileen speaks, the camera listens, and in doing so, so do we. One scene that audiences often cite as deeply affecting is the church scene where the maids finally feel seen. The act of sharing their stories becomes sacred. There's no sermon, no preaching, just testimony. And that quiet act, of being heard, of being believed, resonates far beyond the screen. It's the moment where the film transcends its historical setting and speaks to something timeless, the universal need for dignity. Of course, not every powerful moment is loud. Some slip under the radar but leave a lasting mark. Like the brief scene of Constantine, Skeetus' beloved family maid, being let go. Though her story is mostly told in flashbacks, the emotional weight of her absence hangs over Skeetus' arc like a shadow. When we learn the truth, that her mother fired Constantine to avoid social embarrassment, it reframes everything Skeeter thought she knew about her family. The scene isn't long, but its implications echo through every decision Skeeter makes afterward. It's a quiet indictment, not just of one woman's prejudice, but of the societal norms that taught her to value status over love. In the end, the film's final moments don't scream, they whisper. Aibileen walking away from her job, from the only family she's known, is a scene soaked in both sorrow and liberation. The slow pace, the sound of her steps, the look on her face, it all speaks to a woman who's lost everything, but found herself. It's not a Hollywood ending, but it is a truthful one. And that's what makes it linger. So many films come and go, but the ones that stay with us are those that don't just tell a story. They invite us to feel it, to live inside it. The Help does just that. Whether it's the fire behind Minnie's smirk, the pain behind Aibileen's smile, or the guilt behind Skeetus' drive, every moment contributes to a tapestry of emotion that refuses to be ignored. And maybe that's the true legacy of the film, not just in the scenes we remember, but in the feelings they leave behind. Behind every frame of The Help is a quiet labor of love, an intricate weave of choices, compromises, creative sparks, and sheer human effort. It's the kind of film that doesn't scream its technical accomplishments, yet every scene bears the fingerprints of careful craftsmanship and emotional intuition. From casting decisions that changed the narrative's heartbeat to location choices that grounded the story in tangible authenticity, every production choice contributed to the movie's soulful resonance. What may seem like simple storytelling on the surface is actually the result of countless hours of subtle artistry behind the scenes. It all began with Catherine Stockett's novel, a story inspired by her own upbringing in Jackson, Mississippi, and the women who helped raise her. That emotional foundation made its way into the hands of Tate Taylor, a longtime friend of Stockett's, who had never directed a major feature before. What he lacked in Hollywood experience, he made up for with personal connection. Taylor had lived in Jackson. He had seen the divided sidewalks, the hush in certain conversations, and the quiet power of domestic workers like Aibileen and Minnie. This wasn't just a story for him. It was memory, it was homage, it was a responsibility. And that sincerity translated into every creative decision he made. One of the most defining choices Taylor made early on was to shoot the film on location in Mississippi. Hollywood would have offered studio sets or Southern lookalikes, but Taylor insisted on authenticity. That decision immediately altered the film's DNA. Shooting in Greenwood and Jackson didn't just provide aesthetic realism, it brought the actors face-to-face with the living echoes of the story's past. Walking the same streets, entering homes that still bore the weight of that era, lent a haunting richness to the performances. You can feel it in the way characters walk through sunlit kitchens and humid verandas, like the very air carries memory. But filming in Mississippi wasn't without its challenges. The production arrived in the summer of 2010, one of the hottest on record. Temperatures soared past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and humidity clung to every costume, every makeup touch-up, every carefully rigged shot. And yet, there was a strange kind of poetry in the discomfort. The sweat on characters' brows wasn't cosmetic, it was real. The exhaustion, the heat-induced tension, the genuine longing for shade, they weren't staged, they were lived. The climate itself became a silent character in the film, pressing down on everyone with a weight that mirrored the social pressure simmering just beneath the surface. That realism extended to the set design, which was meticulously crafted to reflect the subtleties of 1960s Southern life. Production designer Mark Ricker didn't just recreate the period, he evoked it with emotional truth. Every wallpaper pattern, every floral couch, every chipped coffee mug was chosen with care. The Leafold home, with its cold pastel walls and tight symmetry, radiated a stifling kind of social conformity. In contrast, Celia Foote's house, lavish and gaudy yet empty, felt like a fortress of loneliness. And Abelin's modest home, bathed in soft golden light, pulsed with warmth and authenticity. These contrasts didn't just fill the screen, they told stories of their own. To get the wardrobe just right, costume designer Sharon Davis undertook an exhaustive exploration of 1960s Southern fashion. But it wasn't about flashy retro aesthetics, it was about character psychology. Hilly Holbrook's polished pastels and tightly cinched waists reflected her need for control and perfection. Skeeter's slightly mismatched, more practical clothing subtly communicated her outsider status. Abilene and Minnis uniforms, always neat but understated, spoke to years of silent service and self-preservation. Even small details, like the shine on a shoe or the choice of earrings, were rooted in each character's personal history. Cinematographer Stephen Goldblatt added another layer of storytelling through his use of light and framing. The visual language of The Help is elegant and restrained, allowing the performances to breathe. Goldblatt often favored soft, natural lighting, particularly in scenes involving Abilene and Mae Mobley, where warmth and intimacy needed to shine through. But when the film turned its gaze toward moments of tension, like Skeeter confronting her mother about Constantine, the lighting shifted subtly, becoming cooler, harsher. These changes weren't loud, but they were deeply effective. The visual palette of the film moved with the emotional current of the story, guiding the audience without overt direction. One of the most rewarding technical achievements, though, wasn't visual, it was tonal. The Help walks a tightrope between heartache and humor, injustice and inspiration. Balancing those tones is no small feat. Much of that balance can be attributed to editor Hughes Winborne, whose cuts and transitions shaped the film's emotional rhythm. Winborne allowed quiet moments to linger, giving actors room to fully express without interruption. A single glance could hold for 2 seconds longer than expected, turning it from a visual beat into an emotional revelation. His editing helped preserve the film's humanity, never rushing its truths or undercutting its sincerity with overly dramatic pacing. Of course, casting was another cornerstone of the film's success, and a process that took instinct as much as vision. Viola Davis wasn't just cast as Abilene, she became her. From the moment she read the script, Davis approached the role with reverence. She knew the emotional weight Abilene carried, the years of pain, the silent strength, and brought it to life with an unflinching honesty that left audiences breathless. Octavia Spencer, a real-life friend of director Tate Taylor, had been the inspiration for Minnie in the novel, but even so, she had to fight for the role in Hollywood. When she finally stepped into the character, the result was electric. Her timing, her fire, her vulnerability. It was a performance forged in authenticity. Emma Stone, cast as Skeeter, brought a fresh energy to the film. She wasn't playing a hero, but a young woman trying to figure out her place in a world she didn't fully understand. Stone's subtle expressions, her discomfort at parties, her hesitation around her mother, her dawning realization of privilege, made Skeeter's journey believable. And then there was Jessica Chastain, whose portrayal of Celia Foote turned what could have been a caricature into a heartbreakingly led performance. Behind her bleached hair and flirty dresses was a woman desperate for acceptance. Chastain infused Celia with a rawness that made every scene ache with feeling. The chemistry between the cast wasn't accidental, it was nurtured. During rehearsals, the actresses spent time together not just running lines, but sharing stories, building trust. This bond translated on screen, particularly in scenes where emotional walls needed to be broken down. When Minnie finally opens up to Celia, or when Aibileen comforts May Mobley, those moments feel earned because they were. The performances grew out of real relationships. There were also moments on set that blurred the line between fiction and reality. One such instance came during the filming of The Church Gathering, where the maids share their stories for Skeeter's book. The scene was already emotional on paper, but something happened during shooting. An unplanned eruption of real tears, real release. The extras playing the maids, many of whom were from local Mississippi communities, found themselves reliving generational pain. The room went silent between takes, not because of direction, but because everyone felt something profound. That scene is powerful not because of how it was written, but because of how it was lived in that moment. Another unforgettable behind-the-scenes moment involved Viola Davis shooting Aibileen's final walk away from the Leafold house. It was the last scene filmed. The emotional weight was not just acting, it was a farewell. To the character, to the crew, to the story they had built together. Davis's tears were unscripted, a culmination of months of emotional excavation. The silence that follows as she walks down the street wasn't filled with music or dialogue. It was filled with everything she carried, and everything she left behind. Even the marketing and release of the film bore an emotional touch. Disney's Touchstone Pictures, which distributed The Help, carefully timed its release on August 10, 2011, to coincide with awards season potential. But beyond the strategy, there was a deeper purpose, to spark conversation. The studio supported screenings for educators, community leaders, and civil rights groups. It wasn't just about box office numbers. It was about the film being seen, discussed, debated. That commitment paid off. The movie didn't just earn critical acclaim and multiple Oscar nominations, it became a cultural event. All of these creative and technical achievements work in harmony, not to dazzle the audience with spectacle, but to draw them deeper into the world of the story. There's no green screen wizardry, no high-tech gimmickry. Instead, there's the soft creak of a wooden floor, the weight of a typewriter's keys, the glint of sunlight on a church window. It's filmmaking as empathy, where every choice is designed not to impress, but to feel. And maybe that's the most remarkable technical feat of all. That a film with such quiet power could leave such a loud impact. That something so grounded in realism could lift viewers into a space of reflection and transformation. Behind every scene of The Help is a team that didn't just tell a story, they believed in it. And that belief is what continues to echo long after the credits roll. The deeper themes and symbolism woven into The Help, 2011, aren't just subtle touches. They are the lifeblood of the narrative, enriching the emotional landscape and enhancing the societal commentary at the film's core. As much as the story explores the lives of domestic workers in 1960s Mississippi, it also explores the human condition in all its complexity, shedding light on issues of race, gender, power, and silence. These aren't just historical conversations. They are universal, reverberating through time and space, offering viewers a mirror to reflect on their own lives and choices. The film's overarching theme is the quiet, often invisible resilience of those who have been marginalized. The maids, Aibileen, Minnie, and others, may serve the homes of their white employers, but it's clear from the start that their lives are far more than mere servitude. They are defined by strength, compassion, and deep personal histories. The Help doesn't just depict their lives, it highlights their humanity and agency, showcasing how each woman, despite the confines of her role, seeks to assert control over her own destiny in small, yet significant ways. The act of telling their stories becomes a form of resistance, a reclamation of voice, a refusal to remain in the shadows. The most powerful example of this is Aibileen's decision to share her experiences with Skeeter. Throughout the film, we watch her guard her emotions, her grief for her lost son, her pain at the injustice she sees every day. But through Skeeter's eyes, Aibileen finds a new way to channel her sorrow, to make her voice matter in a world that has spent decades silencing women like her. When Aibileen writes about the death of her son, it's not just an expression of pain, it's an act of courage. By putting her story into words, she's not just telling the truth, but also inviting others to see her not as an anonymous servant, but as a mother, a person, a whole human being with dreams, fears, and a past that stretches far beyond the doors she cleans. This quiet rebellion against invisibility is mirrored in the lives of the other characters. Minnie, often brash and outspoken, carries the same sense of resilience, albeit in a much more vocal way. She may have a reputation for being feisty and difficult, but as the film unfolds, it becomes clear that her strength is rooted in survival. She survives the abuse of her husband, the prejudice of her employers, and the societal constraints placed on her as a black woman in the South. Her act of revenge against Hilly Holbrook, putting excrement in her pie, becomes a darkly humorous, yet symbolically powerful gesture of taking control in a world that seeks to break her down. Minnie's journey is not just about seeking personal revenge, but about defying the expectations placed on her as a black woman who is expected to stay silent and serve. The film's portrayal of Skeeter's transformation is another integral aspect of its themes. When Skeeter begins her journey, she is portrayed as a young woman with an idealized notion of equality and justice. She doesn't yet understand the entrenched system of power and privilege that exists between herself and the maids. But through her relationship with Aibileen and Minnie, Skeeter is gradually forced to confront the uncomfortable truth about her own complicity in a system that oppresses people like them. Her evolution is a painful but necessary one, a reckoning with the privileges she has, the biases she holds, and the role she must play in dismantling a system of oppression. Her decision to publish the stories of the maids, knowing the consequences it may have for everyone involved, becomes a brave act of defiance against the established norms of society. One of the most striking symbolic elements in The Help is the recurring motif of the pie, a seemingly trivial object that actually carries a deep symbolic weight. The pie, introduced with Minnie's infamous dessert for Hilly Holbrook, represents both personal rebellion and the act of serving the oppressor. At first, the pie is a tool of revenge, Minnie's way of giving Hilly a taste of her own cruelty. Yet, in a broader sense, the pie is a symbol of the power dynamics at play in the movie. It's a way for the oppressed to assert control over those who have, in turn, controlled them. The pie becomes a metaphor for the unacknowledged strength of those who serve, and how, in an unjust world, even the smallest act of resistance can have seismic consequences. Alongside the pie, there's the symbolism of the typewriter. Skeeter's machine is her gateway to discovering the truth, to amplifying the voices of the maids. The typewriter, as an object, is inherently tied to writing, to knowledge, and to the dissemination of truth. In the context of the film, it represents Skeeter's growth, her emerging understanding of her own role in the world, and her eventual refusal to stay silent. As Aibileen and Minnie begin to share their stories with Skeeter, the typewriter becomes an instrument of liberation, not just for the women, but for the entire community. It's through their words, their shared truths, that change begins to take root. The color symbolism in The Help is also highly effective in reinforcing the film's themes. The color palette shifts throughout the movie, often reflecting the emotional states of the characters and the societal pressures they face. One of the most prominent color choices is the stark contrast between the bright, often garish hues of the White family's homes and the muted, earth-toned environments of the maids. These color schemes reflect the division between the two worlds, one built on privilege and the other on hard labor. The maids' homes are filled with warm, muted tones that speak to their humanity, whereas the homes of the White families often feel sterile, uncomfortable, and cold. This visual divide underscores the emotional and societal separation between the two groups and highlights the stark realities of segregation. The film's portrayal of race and class is a critical element of its social commentary. The Help challenges viewers to confront the uncomfortable truths of systemic racism, not as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality for the characters. It does so by drawing attention to the small, everyday indignities suffered by the black maids, indignities that are often so routine that they go unnoticed by the White families they serve. Whether it's using a separate bathroom or being told to stay in the kitchen while the important conversations happen, these moments are a reflection of the dehumanizing effects of segregation. What The Help does so well is show that racism isn't just an overt, violent force. It's also insidious, subtle, and ingrained in the very fabric of society. It's the small, everyday moments that chip away at a person's dignity and self-worth. In this context, the film also highlights the gendered aspects of oppression. The women in The Help are not just fighting against the racism inherent in society. They are also fighting against the sexism that limits their opportunities, their freedoms, and their voices. For Aibeline and Minnie, their lives are defined by their roles as domestic workers, a profession that is inherently tied to gender expectations. Their value is determined by their ability to serve, to care for others, to remain silent in the face of mistreatment. Skeeter's journey is about realizing that women, regardless of race, are oppressed in different ways. It's her awareness of this duality, racism compounded by sexism, that drives her to take a stand. The way the film intertwines these two forms of oppression makes it clear that The Help is about much more than just race. It's about a collective fight for dignity, autonomy, and equality. The film's exploration of privilege, both racial and class-based, is also central to its themes. The characters who hold power, like Hilly Holbrook, embody the dangers of unchecked privilege. Hilly's unapologetic belief in her superiority, her disregard for the lives and well-being of the maids, represents the toxic nature of privilege when it is left unchecked. Hilly's characterization is a reminder that racism is not just an individual attitude. It's a system of power that rewards those who perpetuate it and punishes those who challenge it. By contrasting Hilly's cruelty with the kindness and generosity of characters like Celia Foote, who may not understand the full depth of her privilege but tries to treat the maids with decency, the film suggests that awareness and empathy can be powerful antidotes to systemic injustice. At its heart, The Help is a story about change, personal, social, and cultural. It's about the slow, often painful process of awakening to the reality of oppression and finding the courage to speak out. It's about realizing that even the smallest acts of resistance, telling a story, standing up to an injustice, or simply acknowledging someone's humanity, can create ripples of change. The film doesn't offer a simple, neat resolution to the issues it raises. Instead, it leaves viewers with the understanding that progress is hard-won, and the fight for equality and justice is ongoing. But it also offers hope, suggesting that by sharing our stories, listening to each other, and standing together, we can begin to break the chains of silence and oppression that bind us. The visual storytelling in The Help, 2011, is meticulously crafted to enhance its themes, character dynamics, and emotional depth. Director Tate Taylor's approach to the film is grounded in authenticity, yet it also employs cinematic techniques that elevate the narrative, making it not just a historical drama but an immersive emotional journey. From the vibrant, sun-drenched Mississippi setting to the intimate, often stark compositions that capture the characters' inner worlds, every visual element in the film works in harmony with its themes and storytelling. The cinematography by Stephen Goldblatt plays a significant role in shaping the film's visual language. The film's color palette, in particular, is one of its most striking features. The bright, warm colors of the 1960s Southern town reflect the contrasting lives of its characters. The homes of the white families are often bathed in bright, almost oppressive light. Wide open spaces filled with white walls and lavish furnishings. These homes symbolize the wealth and privilege of the families, but they also feel cold and sterile, underscoring the emotional distance and segregation that defines the world of the film. This stark, polished environment contrasts sharply with the homes of the black maids, where the lighting is softer and more intimate. The darker, earth-toned colors that dominate these spaces represent the warmth and humanity of the maids but also the oppression they face, making their lives feel confined within these spaces despite their intrinsic vibrance. Goldblatt uses framing to reflect power dynamics throughout the film. Often, he places the maids in the background of a scene, within the frame of a domestic space, or behind physical barriers like windows and doorways. These visual choices emphasize their role as servants, always present, but always in the background. However, as the story progresses and the characters begin to assert their voices, the framing subtly shifts. There are moments when the maids move into the foreground of the frame, stepping into the light and into the viewer's view, signaling their reclaiming of agency. This transition in the composition is visually subtle but symbolically powerful. as it mirrors the internal growth of the characters, particularly Aibileen, Minnie, and Skeeter. The camera also lingers on key details to evoke deeper emotional resonance. Close-up shots of Abileen's face, for instance, draw the audience into her quiet strength and pain. These close-ups allow the viewer to connect with her inner turmoil, her grief, and her fierce determination. There is a remarkable tenderness in the way the camera frames Aibileen as she interacts with the children she cares for, particularly in her moments of private reflection or when she teaches May Mobley life lessons. These moments are rich with unspoken emotion, their power derived not from dialogue but from the intimacy created between the actor and the camera. The editing in The Help is another key factor in its emotional pull. The pacing is deliberate, allowing for moments of reflection and character development to unfold without feeling rushed. This careful pace ensures that the gravity of the narrative is fully absorbed by the audience. The transitions between scenes are smooth, often relying on dissolves and fade-outs that blend one moment seamlessly into the next. This technique allows the film to flow like a quiet river, its narrative moving forward steadily while leaving room for quiet moments of introspection. The editing also accentuates the emotional beats of the film, especially in moments of tension or emotional release, where the cuts become sharper and more pronounced. For example, the scene where Minnie serves Hilly the infamous pie is cut in such a way that the building suspense is almost palpable, intensifying the shock and humor of the moment. The pacing of the film also aligns perfectly with its themes. The tension between the slow, often agonizing revelations of the characters' inner lives and the rapid, violent cultural shifts they experience is mirrored in the editing. The film's transitions between personal moments and broader social dynamics emphasize the emotional costs of the choices each character makes. The way the editing gradually shifts from intimate, personal moments to larger societal clashes ensures that the film never loses sight of its core emotional journey, one of personal growth, loss, and the quiet act of standing up for what's right. Sound design and music are used in The Help not merely as background elements but as integral components of its storytelling. The film's soundtrack, composed by Thomas Newman, is subtle and haunting, often giving the film an emotional depth that goes beyond its visual elements. The music is carefully tailored to reflect the tension of the period, the sorrow of the maid's experiences, and the occasional hope that flickers throughout the narrative. Newman's score uses simple yet evocative melodies, often played on piano or strings, that mirror the deep emotional current flowing beneath the surface of the characters' everyday lives. Music plays a particularly powerful role in moments of emotional release or tension. When Skeeter first starts to publish the stories of the maids, the music swells gently, carrying a sense of triumph and fear. It's a moment of quiet rebellion, and the music underscores the enormity of Skeeter's choice to stand against the social order. In contrast, the scenes of violence or cruelty are underscored with silence or harsh, jarring sounds, heightening the emotional brutality of these moments. The use of music is also deeply connected to the cultural setting of the film. The Help is set in a period of deep social and political turmoil in the United States, during the Civil Rights Movement, and the soundtrack subtly weaves in the cultural atmosphere of the 1960s. From the pop hits of the time to the subtle inclusion of gospel and blues, the music of The Help is reflective of the Black experience in America. Songs like The Wait by the band and Try a Little Tenderness serve not just as nostalgic reminders of the era but as thematic cues that speak to the struggles and joys of the characters. These songs act as a reminder that the story of The Help is not just a historical retelling, but a part of a larger cultural conversation about race, class, and gender. The sound design also contributes to the film's emotional weight. The ambient noises of Mississippi, the chirping of crickets, the hum of cicadas, the creak of old houses, add texture to the film's setting, transporting viewers to a world that feels tangible and alive. These environmental sounds ground the audience in the time and place of the story, making the emotional journey of the characters all the more poignant. The silence in certain scenes, particularly those that deal with the racial divides and personal injustices, speaks volumes about the unsaid, the unacknowledged. The absence of sound in these moments is a deliberate choice that makes the viewer acutely aware of the emotional gaps between the characters. Director Tate Taylor's stylistic choices give the film a distinct visual and narrative quality. One of the most significant aspects of Taylor's direction is his ability to balance humor with pathos, to weave light-hearted moments with deeply emotional or even painful ones. Taylor's sense of pacing allows the audience to laugh one moment and then be brought to tears the next, ensuring that the emotional rollercoaster never feels forced or overdone. The humor in The Help is never cruel. It's rooted in the characters' resilience and their ability to find moments of levity, even in the darkest of times. This emotional complexity is further highlighted by Taylor's use of visual irony. Scenes that juxtapose domesticity with inequality, such as the maids preparing meals for families who treat them as lesser, serve as a subtle but effective commentary on the societal divisions of the time. Taylor's direction also makes effective use of close-ups and wide shots to create a visual contrast between personal intimacy and societal expansiveness. In moments of personal conflict or emotional revelation, the close-up shots draw the audience into the characters' experiences. Conversely, the wide shots, often of the Mississippi landscape or the grand homes of the white families, evoke a sense of the larger, oppressive system that is in play. Taylor uses the space between these shots to highlight the tension between personal relationships and societal constraints, making the world of The Help feel both intimate and overwhelmingly vast. The chemistry between the cast members of The Help, 2011, is undeniably one of the driving forces behind the film's emotional impact. The ensemble cast, made up of veteran actors and rising stars, brings to life a rich tapestry of characters whose interactions breathe life into the complex social dynamics of 1960s Mississippi. From the compassionate yet steely Abilene, portrayed by Viola Davis, to the rebellious, idealistic Skeeter, played by Emma Stone, the performances feel like an intricate dance between characters who are united by a common goal but separated by deep cultural divides. The cast's chemistry elevates the script from a historical drama to a deeply personal exploration of race, power, and human connection. Viola Davis and Emma Stone's partnership stands at the heart of the film. Abilene's quiet strength and Skeeter's fierce ambition make them an unlikely duo, yet Davis and Stone manage to build a subtle, complex rapport that is essential to the film's emotional core. Their scenes together radiate with an unspoken understanding, despite the vast gulf between their lived experiences. Davis's portrayal of Abilene is filled with grace, vulnerability, and an underlying anger that simmers beneath the surface. Her chemistry with Stone creates an emotional arc that feels both natural and transformative. Skeeter, who begins the film as a wide-eyed idealist, gradually matures as she witnesses the injustice faced by the maids, and Davis's ability to communicate the depth of Abilene's emotional world makes Skeeter's journey of self-discovery feel authentic. The vulnerability and wisdom Davis brings to Abilene make it clear that, although their worlds are different, their connection is one of mutual respect, which grows steadily as the film progresses. Stone, on the other hand, captures Skeeter's transition from naivety to understanding with remarkable nuance. Her character's journey is deeply intertwined with Abilene's, and the bond that forms between them is rooted in a shared commitment to telling the truth, regardless of the personal cost. The evolution of their relationship, and how it contrasts with the lives of the other characters, is a testament to the delicate balance of power and empathy at the heart of the film. Stone's portrayal of Skeeter's internal struggle as she navigates the waters of Southern privilege and social activism adds layers to the character, making her both relatable and heroic. Another key dynamic is the relationship between Abilene and Minnie, played by Octavia Spencer. Minnie's bold, brash personality serves as a foil to Abilene's quieter, more reserved nature, and Spencer and Davis's on-screen chemistry creates an interesting, heartwarming contrast. Minnie, who initially comes off as a fiery and tough-talking woman with a sense of humor and defiance, is revealed to have her own insecurities and fears. Spencer's portrayal of Minnie is layered with sharp wit and vulnerability, making her one of the film's standout characters. The bond between Abilene and Minnie is less about ideology and more about the shared experience of being black women in a world that constantly undermines their value. The scenes between the two actresses, often filled with humor, tenderness, and pain, highlight how their differing personalities complement one another. As the film progresses, we witness how their loyalty to one another transcends their differences, showing that true friendship is forged not through similarity but through mutual respect and solidarity. The behind-the-scenes dynamics of The Help also played a crucial role in shaping the final film. Director Tate Taylor's close relationship with the novel's author, Catherine Stockett, allowed for a deep sense of trust and collaboration that permeated the production. Taylor, who grew up in Mississippi and knew the world that Stockett had written about, brought an authenticity to the film that was vital in ensuring the portrayal of the South was both truthful and respectful. Taylor was sensitive to the historical context of the story and the real-world implications of depicting race and class in a period of extreme division. His direction allowed the cast to fully inhabit their characters, drawing from their own personal experiences and backgrounds to deepen the emotional resonance of the film. Taylor's commitment to making the characters feel real, both in their flaws and their strengths, ensured that their relationships felt organic and not overly stylized. The film's atmosphere was also shaped by the production design and the careful attention to detail that was paid to recreating 1960s Mississippi. The homes, cars, and streets were all designed to reflect the opulence of the white families as well as the humble, modest lives of the black characters. This contrast was integral to illustrating the racial divide that the film tackles so head-on. The use of space, particularly the differences between the wide-open, well-lit homes of the white families and the cramped, dark spaces where the black maids live and work, subtly reinforced the social hierarchy at play. These set choices were designed to make viewers feel the emotional distance between the characters and the environment they inhabit. The sets also offered a visually rich context for the actors to interact with, further enhancing the chemistry between them. Beyond the sets and costumes, the film's lighting played a key role in highlighting the emotional journeys of the characters. As the narrative progresses, the lighting shifts in subtle ways to reflect the characters' transformations. Skeeter's transition from the bright, clear light of privilege to the darker, more uncertain space of activism is visually represented in the way her world is lit. Similarly, Abilene and Minnis' journey from subjugation to empowerment is illuminated through the gradual shifts in lighting, giving the audience a visual cue to the emotional weight of their actions. When it comes to the audience's reactions, The Help resonated strongly both critically and commercially, with wide-ranging responses that reflect the film's powerful emotional impact. At the time of its release, it garnered significant praise for its performances, particularly those of Viola Davis and Octavia Spencer. Davis's portrayal of Abilene was lauded for its subtle depth, while Spencer's portrayal of Minnie earned her an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. The film's exploration of race, class, and gender struck a chord with audiences, and it quickly became a cultural touchstone. Viewers were moved by the strength of the characters' convictions and the bond they shared, despite the oppressive societal forces working against them. However, The Help also faced criticism, particularly concerning its portrayal of race relations. Some critics argued that the film, based on a white author's perspective of black maids, oversimplified the complexities of the civil rights movement and offered a somewhat sanitized view of the era. The critiques focused on the film's portrayal of white characters as saviors, with Skeeter as the central figure who ultimately helps expose the injustices faced by the black maids. Critics felt that the film, while well-meaning, did not give enough voice to the black characters' own agency in their fight for justice. Despite these criticisms, The Help became a cultural phenomenon, sparking conversations about race, privilege, and the struggle for social justice that continued long after the credits rolled. The film's ability to evoke empathy and foster discussions about racial inequality gave it staying power. It became a book club favorite, with readers and viewers alike delving into the themes of systemic racism and the personal sacrifices made by those who resist it. The film's success was also reflected in its critical and commercial achievements, including multiple Oscar nominations and a box office gross of over $200 million. In the years since its release, The Help has remained a topic of debate and discussion. Its portrayal of the South in the 1960s is seen by some as a testament to the resilience and strength of those who fought for civil rights, while others view it as a reflection of the limits of white-centered narratives in telling stories about black experiences. Whether through its performances, its exploration of race and class, or the behind-the-scenes stories that shaped it, The Help continues to provoke strong reactions from audiences and critics alike. The film's legacy endures through its continued fan engagement. Social media discussions and think pieces continue to analyze its themes, while people from all walks of life revisit the film, often with new perspectives. For many, The Help remains a touchstone for understanding race, class, and gender in America, but also a reminder of the importance of telling untold stories through diverse perspectives. Makes The Help visually striking is how every stylistic choice, from the use of color to the framing of shots, serves the narrative. Every decision, from the pacing to the sound, works together to create a cohesive, immersive experience that brings the historical setting to life without overshadowing the human drama at the heart of the story. By seamlessly integrating these cinematic techniques with the themes of race, class, and gender, the film becomes a visual and emotional exploration of power dynamics, oppression, and the quiet resilience of those who fight for their voices to be heard. Taylor's vision is clear. In a world that tries to silence them, the voices of the maids will not be ignored. And through the film's stunning visual storytelling, their stories will resonate long after the credits roll. ChatGPT said, "The Help, 2011, stands as a significant cultural artifact, not just as a successful adaptation of Catherine Stockett's best-selling novel, but as a film that has continued to spark dialogue, introspection, and action in the years since its release." As we look back on its legacy, it's clear that the film transcended its place as a period drama, pushing boundaries in ways that have influenced filmmaking, popular culture, and even broader societal conversations about race and power. From the very beginning, The Help made a lasting impact on its genre. Historical dramas often take a cautious approach to difficult subjects, especially when depicting eras rife with social inequality, but The Help took a bold stance, presenting the stark realities of segregation while also focusing on the personal stories of those who lived through it. The film made visible the lives of domestic workers, black women who had long been relegated to the background of history, and shifted the focus from the white families they worked for to their own narratives. This shift was significant because it demonstrated that even within oppressive systems, human agency, courage, and solidarity could break through. By presenting these stories, The Help paved the way for future films and TV shows that sought to give voice to marginalized groups, shifting the trajectory of how historical stories were told in Hollywood. The ripple effects of this genre-defining move can be seen in the rise of films like 12 Years a Slave, 2013, and TV series like Lovecraft Country, 2020, which also dealt with historical narratives from the perspectives of African Americans. In terms of filmmaking, The Help showcased the delicate balance of tone required to address racial and social justice issues in a commercially viable way. Director Tate Taylor's sensitive direction ensured that the film wasn't just another Hollywood portrayal of the civil rights movement, but a story that grounded its social commentary in the characters' emotions and relationships. His choice to focus on the quiet rebellion of the domestic workers and their complex relationships with their employers avoided the simplification of history into easy moral narratives. Instead, the film presented a nuanced portrait of the South during the 1960s, one that was both painful and empowering. The way Taylor navigated the potential for melodrama in such a heavy subject matter is noteworthy. The careful blend of humor, pain, and inspiration created a film that felt accessible yet profoundly impactful. The performances were another key factor in the film's success, particularly that of Viola Davis as Aibileen, whose portrayal of a woman quietly grappling with her sense of worth in a deeply oppressive world earned her widespread acclaim. Davis's nuanced, restrained performance provided a deep emotional core to the film, and it became an iconic moment in cinematic history, one that would cement her as one of the finest actresses of her generation. The film's support of Davis, and of the powerful performance from Octavia Spencer as Minnie, was also an important step forward for the representation of black women in Hollywood. Spencer's comedic yet deeply emotional portrayal earned her the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, and the two women's performances brought a much-needed visibility to black actresses in roles that were not relegated to stereotypes or secondary status. In terms of awards and critical reception, The Help quickly became a critical darling, earning an impressive 4 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, Best Actress for Davis, and Best Supporting Actress for Spencer. The film won several other accolades, including a Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Performance by a Cast in a Motion Picture, underscoring the strength of its ensemble. These awards, particularly Spencer's win, were significant milestones in an industry that has long struggled with issues of representation, proving that films about race and injustice could not only be made but could be recognized and celebrated. These victories, however, were not without controversy. Many argued that the film's portrayal of race relations, and its centering of a white protagonist's journey, simplified and even diminished the struggles of black people during the civil rights movement. Critics who took issue with the film's approach have prompted ongoing discussions about the ethics of telling marginalized stories from the perspective of those in positions of privilege. These discussions have only deepened the cultural impact of The Help, forcing the film to be re-evaluated and critiqued in light of its role in shaping the narrative of America's racial history. One of the most significant aspects of The Help's legacy is how it contributed to a shift in public awareness and dialogue about race, inequality, and power. The film's widespread success led to an increase in conversations about systemic racism, particularly regarding the treatment of domestic workers, who were largely black women working in white homes, and how their contributions to American society had long been erased from the historical record. The film resonated with audiences who saw in it their own experiences with inequality, both historical and contemporary, and it became a touchstone for a generation grappling with issues of race and class. Yet, it also sparked debates that have remained relevant in the years following its release. The criticisms of its portrayal of race as a kind of white savior narrative have forced viewers and critics alike to engage with the complexities of storytelling and representation, particularly in how white-centered perspectives can dominate the narratives of black experiences. The Help opened the door to a broader conversation about who gets to tell stories and how those stories are shaped by historical power dynamics. As the film's cultural footprint grew, it became a kind of benchmark for understanding the racial dynamics of 1960s America. While some viewers saw it as a celebration of solidarity and empowerment, others viewed it as a missed opportunity to fully engage with the struggles of Black Americans in that era. Regardless of these differing perspectives, the conversations the film ignited have had lasting implications, and the film continues to serve as a point of reference in discussions about race in both the media and the public consciousness. Many people who were introduced to the history of black domestic workers and their crucial role in the civil rights movement through The Help have gone on to explore further the stories of black resistance and resilience. Whether through books, documentaries, or other films, the movie has encouraged people to learn more about this pivotal moment in American history. In terms of pop culture, The Help also permeated the collective imagination, influencing everything from book clubs to social media to mainstream fashion. The movie's key moments, like Minna's famous chocolate pie scene or Abelin's tender teaching moments with young May Mobley, became iconic, quoted in casual conversation or meme culture. The film's portrayal of women of all races, particularly strong black women, also sparked conversations around the roles women play in fighting for justice and equality, and the ongoing struggles they face. In the years since its release, it's clear that the film's impact has continued to resonate, especially in an era of heightened social activism and calls for racial justice. Yet, as with all films that tackle contentious and significant social issues, The Help is far from perfect. Its portrayal of the black experience in the South, and its emphasis on Skeeter's role in telling the story, has been critiqued for not fully capturing the depth of black resistance and activism during the civil rights movement. But this very critique points to why the film remains culturally significant. It continues to provoke thought, engage with complicated histories, and push viewers to confront uncomfortable truths. The debate around the film's depiction of race relations is an ongoing one, and that in itself is a testament to its lasting relevance. Ultimately, The Help endures not just as a film but as a touchstone in the broader cultural conversation about race, privilege, and justice. It is a film that has sparked discussion, reflection, and sometimes controversy, but it has also opened doors to greater understanding and awareness. Its legacy is not simply in the accolades it earned or the box office success it enjoyed, but in the way it made people confront the uncomfortable truths of America's history. As such, The Help will continue to be remembered as a movie that did more than entertain. It made an indelible mark on the cultural landscape, inviting viewers to re-examine the past and its ongoing implications for the present. The Help is a film that does more than simply entertain. It challenges, inspires, and leaves an indelible mark on the viewer. It's a piece of cinematic storytelling that weaves together the complexities of race, privilege, and power into a narrative that is both deeply personal and universally relevant. What makes the movie stand out is not only the powerful performances by an incredibly talented cast, led by Viola Davis and Octavia Spencer, but also its ability to explore the deeply entrenched social structures of 1960s America with a rare blend of compassion, humor, and painful truth. From the opening moments, The Help sets itself apart by centering the experiences of black domestic workers, women whose stories had long been relegated to the margins of history. In doing so, it not only highlights the voices of the marginalized but also challenges the dominant narratives about race and power in America. The films focus on the relationships between these women and the white families they served, especially the intricate dynamics between Abilene, Minnie, and Skeeter, reveals the ways in which institutionalized racism permeates every aspect of life, even the most intimate. The tension between these characters drives the emotional core of the film, making each of their journeys not only poignant but also essential to understanding the broader societal forces at play. But The Help is not just a film about history, it's a story about resilience, friendship, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when the cost is great. The relationships at the heart of the film are complex, layered, and multifaceted, showing that even in a world defined by injustice, humanity and solidarity can create powerful change. Abilene's quiet strength, Minnie's fierce loyalty, and Skeeter's growing sense of responsibility all serve as testaments to the power of empathy, action, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. And while the film is undoubtedly focused on the specific historical context of 1960s segregation, its themes resonate just as strongly today, in a world where conversations about race, privilege, and justice remain as urgent and relevant as ever. The movie's impact was undeniable, both critically and culturally. The performances were widely lauded, with Viola Davis earning an Academy Award nomination for her role as Abilene and Octavia Spencer winning Best Supporting Actress for her portrayal of Minnie. These accolades helped cement the film's place in Hollywood history, and the film's success at the box office demonstrated that audiences were ready for stories that told the truth about America's complicated racial history. The Help also became a cultural touchstone, sparking conversation and debate about how race is portrayed in media, who gets to tell stories, and the role of white allies in social justice movements. These discussions continue to reverberate long after the film's release, making The Help not just a film of its time, but one that continues to shape the way we understand and engage with the past. At the same time, The Help isn't without its controversies. The film has been criticized for its portrayal of the civil rights movement, with some accusing it of reducing the complexity of black activism to a white-centered narrative. The focus on Skeeter as the protagonist, rather than the black women whose stories are being told, has sparked important conversations about the ethics of telling marginalized stories from the perspective of those in power. These critiques are essential to the ongoing conversation about how to tell history and whose voices are given prominence. And yet, despite these valid criticisms, The Help remains a film that forces viewers to reckon with America's history of segregation and oppression, and to ask difficult questions about the present. The cinematic techniques used in The Help also contribute to its standing as a significant piece of filmmaking. From the rich cinematography that brings 1960s Jackson, Mississippi, to life to the evocative use of music and sound design that underscores the emotional weight of each scene, the film is a masterclass in visual storytelling. Director Tate Taylor's ability to balance moments of levity with the heaviness of the subject matter is another key reason for the film's success, making it a deeply emotional experience without overwhelming the audience with its weight. The pacing of the film, along with its careful attention to detail, allows the story to unfold naturally, drawing viewers into the world of the characters and making their struggles and triumphs feel immediate and real. In its exploration of themes such as racism, inequality, and the power of individual action, The Help doesn't just provide a snapshot of a particular moment in history, it invites viewers to reflect on the ongoing relevance of these issues today. The film's commentary on race and class, especially in the context of the civil rights movement, encourages us to look at the systems of power that continue to shape our world. It challenges us to confront the uncomfortable truths of our past and to ask what we are doing in the present to create a more just and equal future. As we come to the end of this exploration of The Help, it's clear that this film is much more than just a story about the 1960s. It's a film that captures the human spirit, the way in which ordinary people can rise above their circumstances and make a difference, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. It's a film about the strength of women, the power of friendship, and the courage to stand up for what's right. And it's a film that continues to resonate because the questions it raises, about race, power, and justice, are as relevant now as they were when it was made. If you loved this breakdown, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of cinema. Let's keep exploring movies together. There's always more to discover, and I can't wait to see you next time for another journey into the heart of filmmaking.